It was supposed to be a quiet Tuesday night. Marcus Hill had spent 11 hours on his feet, standing post, scanning crowds, moving in formation through corridors of power that most people only ever see on television. He was tired in that deep, bone-level way that doesn't come from physical exhaustion alone. It was the kind of tired that accumulates over years, over a lifetime of carrying more than your share, of proving yourself in rooms that weren't built for you. But when he buckled his daughter into the passenger seat and pulled out of the parking garage, the weight started to lift. Because Amara was there, 14 years old, bright as a sunbeam, already arguing about why her playlist was objectively superior to his, and Marcus Hill, decorated Secret Service agent, found himself completely outmatched. She was everything, the reason he pressed his badge to his chest every morning, the reason he came home. The drive through the suburban streets of Fairfax County, Virginia, should have taken 20 minutes. The neighborhood was the kind of quiet that costs money. Wide lanes, pruned hedges, streetlights spaced evenly like soldiers standing watch. Rain had come down earlier that evening, and now the roads were slick and dark and reflective, every surface holding a shimmering ghost of the sky above it. Marcus hummed along softly to a song on the radio. In the passenger seat, Amara had gone quiet in a way that wasn't her usual quiet. Not the comfortable silence of someone lost in their phone. Something else. He glanced over, and that's when he saw it. The slight rise and fall of her shoulders. The way her hand had drifted upward, almost unconsciously, to rest against her sternum. The thin line of her lips, pressed together in that particular way she had when she was trying not to worry him. Amara. His voice was low, steady. The voice of a man trained to stay calm when everything around him is falling apart. Baby girl, you okay? She looked at him, and in her eyes, in that fraction of a second before she could compose her expression, he saw it, the flicker of real fear. I'm fine, Daddy, she said. But her voice was tight, compressed, like it was being squeezed through a narrowing passage. Marcus Hill had been trained to read people. He had stood in rooms with heads of state, with foreign dignitaries, with individuals whose entire lives were constructed performances. He knew what a lie looked like when it wore a brave face. His daughter was struggling to breathe. Amara had been diagnosed with moderate persistent asthma at age 7. For most of her life, it had been a manageable companion, an inconvenience, not a threat. Her rescue inhaler lived in the small zipper pocket of whatever bag she was carrying that day, the same way other kids carried lip balm or headphones. But 3 weeks earlier, they had discovered the inhaler was low. Marcus had called in a refill. The prescription was supposed to be ready. He had driven to the pharmacy. There had been a mistake in the system, a clerical error, a miscommunication between insurance codes. The pharmacist was apologetic. Marcus had nodded calmly and driven away with nothing. He had meant to go back. Life had gotten in the way. And now, in the blue-wash dark of a wet suburban Tuesday, that oversight was metastasizing into something else entirely. Where's your backup? He asked, his voice still controlled, even as his knuckles tightened slightly on the steering wheel. Amara's brow furrowed. She reached into her jacket pocket, came up empty. Checked the other side. Her bag in the back seat. I thought I put it. She stopped, coughed. One short, tight, involuntary cough that she tried to swallow. I left it at home, in my room. Marcus pressed his foot to the accelerator. Not dramatically, not yet, but with purpose. They were 8 minutes from home. Maybe 6 if he pushed it. He never made it. The police cruiser materialized from a side street, a dark shape that became a blinding constellation of light and sound in the space of a second. Marcus saw the sweep of the spotlight as it hit his rear window, whitewashing the interior of his car. He pulled over with practiced precision, easing to the curb in a single, unhurried motion. He had been through this before. Every black man he knew had been through this before, had developed their own protocol, their own choreography, for the moments that followed. Hands visible, voice neutral, no sudden movements. Communicate clearly. He rolled down his window and sat back, hands resting in plain sight on the top of the steering wheel. Rain misted through the open gap, cold and fine, settling on his forearm. Through the side mirror, he watched the officer approach. White male, mid-40s, broad through the shoulders, moving with the particular unhurried deliberateness of someone who has never had cause to feel the urgency of this kind of moment from the other side. The officer's hand rested on his belt. His gaze swept the vehicle as he walked. Officer Grant stopped at the driver's side window. He said nothing for a moment. Just looked. License and registration, he said finally. His voice was flat, professional in its cadence, but stripped of warmth, stripped of the ordinary courtesy that makes a traffic stop feel like an interaction between human beings. Yes, sir, Marcus said. Calm, measured. He began to reach slowly toward the glove compartment. Slowly, Grant said. The word landed like a stone. Marcus paused, held the officer's gaze for just a fraction of a second. then moved with deliberate, telegraphed care, retrieving the documents and holding them out with 2 fingers. Grant took them, looked them over, looked back at Marcus. "You know why I stopped you?" "No, sir." "You were doing 37 in a 30 zone." Grant said it with the inflection of someone announcing a verdict. "And your left rear brake light is out." Marcus nodded. He was not thinking about the brake light. He was listening to his daughter's breathing, which had changed in the last 2 minutes. It was more audible now. There was a quality to it, a slight whistling undertone on the exhale that made the hair on the back of his neck rise. "Officer, I understand," he said carefully. "And I'll take full responsibility for both of those things. But I need you to understand. My daughter is in the passenger seat and she is having an asthma attack. I need to get her home or to a hospital right now." He gestured toward Amara, who had slumped slightly in her seat. Her eyes were partially closed. Her breathing was now visible, her chest rising and falling with an effort that should have been invisible. Grant looked at Amara, then back at Marcus. His expression did not change. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle." The words hung in the wet air between them. For a fraction of a second, Marcus didn't move, not out of defiance, out of disbelief. Then he processed the instruction. "Officer, sir, step out of the vehicle, now." And in the passenger seat, Amara Hill made a sound that Marcus had heard once before, 6 years earlier, during a severe attack that had put her in the pediatric ICU. A high, thin, desperate sound, like something being slowly closed off. If you've ever felt the fear of being helpless in a moment like this, hit that like button right now. And if you want to see what happens next, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because what's coming will leave you speechless. Every second that passed was a second. Amara wasn't breathing right. Marcus knew the physiology. He knew what bronchospasm looked like in its early stages, and what it looked like when it crossed over into something that required immediate medical intervention. He had read every pamphlet, sat through every pulmonologist appointment, memorized the warning signs, the way other fathers memorized baseball statistics. She was crossing over. He opened the door, stepped out, kept his hands visible, raised slightly at his sides, the universal posture of non-threat that he had deployed so many times in his professional life, but had never imagined using on a quiet street in his own county while his daughter suffocated 24 inches away. "My daughter needs emergency help," he said, and his voice, trained, controlled, composed under fire, cracked on the last word. "Just slightly. Just enough. Get to the back of your vehicle," Grant said. He had stepped back from the door. His hand was no longer resting on his belt. It was closer to it. "Please listen to me." Marcus did not move toward the back of the vehicle. He stayed by the door, in eye line of Amara, watching her chest, counting the seconds between each labored breath. "I am not refusing to cooperate. I am not a threat. But my child, my daughter, is in that car having a respiratory emergency. You can detain me. You can arrest me. But please, right now, call an ambulance." Grant's jaw set. He had heard the words. Something in his posture made it clear he had heard them and made a decision about what they meant, about what the man in front of him meant. "Sir, I'm not going to ask you again." "Then call 911 yourself." Marcus's voice had dropped. Not in surrender, in absolute precision, each word placed with surgical clarity. "She is 14 years old, and she cannot breathe." A bystander had stopped on the sidewalk. A woman, middle-aged, holding an umbrella, her grocery bag dangling forgotten from one hand. She was watching. Others had appeared in the windows of nearby homes, drawn by the lights, by some primal awareness of something going wrong in the ordinary fabric of their neighborhood. Grant moved. Not toward the car, not toward his radio. Toward Marcus. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." "I'm not going to fight you," Marcus said. And he turned, because the calculus of this moment, of any black man's moment in this position, is not simple math. It is survival math. It is the arithmetic of who gets believed and who gets a bullet. "But I need you to understand, she needs help now." And then he was against the hood of his own car, rain-slicked metal cold against his cheek, Grant's hand pressing his wrist together, and through the windshield, just inches from his face, distorted by rain droplets and reflections, he could see Amara. She had turned toward him. Her eyes were open. Her mouth was moving. She was trying to say his name. She couldn't get enough air to make the sound. The woman on the sidewalk screamed, "Oh my God, that girl is blue. Someone call 911. Call 911. Everything happened at once. A second bystander, a young man in a running jacket, had already pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking as he spoke, fast and urgent, to a dispatcher. Somewhere down the block, a porch light switched on. A door opened. A man in a bathrobe was on his own phone. The woman with the umbrella had dropped her groceries and was moving toward the car, toward the passenger window, pressing her palm flat against the glass. "She needs air. She needs her inhaler." "Is there anyone?" Inside the car, Amara's head had dropped back against the headrest. Her fingers, which had been gripping the seatbelt, had gone slack. Grant had looked up. His hand was still on Marcus's wrist, but something had shifted in him. A hairline fracture in the certainty that had governed his actions for the last 4 minutes. He looked at the girl in the car. He looked at the woman screaming on the sidewalk. He looked at the phone screens being raised into the night air, their little lights blinking on like stars, recording everything. There is a moment in every crisis, every real, life-and-death crisis, when time does something strange. It doesn't slow down or speed up. It fragments. It becomes a series of still images, separated by darkness, each one carrying a weight disproportionate to its duration. Marcus Hill experienced those images from the hood of his own car. The reflection of his daughter's face in the windshield, her lips parted, her eyes half closed, the terrible stillness of someone whose body is working too hard on the inside to show anything on the outside. Grant stepping back, finally stepping back, reaching for his radio. His voice when it came was different, higher, stripped of its professional flatness, saying words that sounded like they were coming from someone who had just understood the nature of what was happening. I need a medical unit at. Marcus not waiting. Marcus standing, turning, not asking permission, moving to the passenger door in 2 strides and wrenching it open. Amara half falling toward him. He caught her. She was lighter than she should have been, or maybe he was stronger than he thought, because he had her in his arms and her head against his chest before he had consciously decided to move. I've got you, he said into her hair. Amara, I've got you. Breathe with me. Slow, breathe with me. Her chest heaved. A thin wheeze escaped. She gripped his jacket with both hands, fingers twisted in the fabric, and he held her against him in the cold rain, this girl who was everything, this girl he had moved heaven and bureaucracy and entire schedules of protection details to parent alone, and he breathed. Loudly, deliberately, so she could feel it through his chest, could follow the rhythm of it. The ambulance turned the corner. Its lights joined the police lights. Red, blue, red, blue. Together they turned the wet street into something that looked like a war zone or a celebration, and it was impossible to tell which. The paramedics were out of the vehicle before it fully stopped. A woman and a man, moving with that particular efficiency of people for whom crisis is an ordinary vocabulary. The woman reached Amara first. What's her name? Amara. 14. Asthma. No rescue inhaler present. She's been in distress for, I don't know, 7 minutes. More. Marcus heard his own voice, stripped of everything except the essential information, because he was, at the deepest level, still an agent. Still trained. Still refusing to let terror override function. The paramedic had already pulled an albuterol nebulizer from the kit. The other was kneeling beside Amara, measuring pulse ox with a small clip on her fingertip. 79%, he said quietly. To his partner, not to Marcus. But Marcus heard it. 79% oxygen saturation. The number dropped through him like a stone through water. Below 95% is concerning. Below 90 is danger. Below 85 is emergency. 79. He had pulled over 7 minutes ago. Take a breath right now. Seriously. Because this story isn't over. If you're watching this and thinking this shouldn't happen to anyone, share this video right now. Every share brings this story to someone who needs to see it. And subscribe if you haven't already. The next part will change everything. Officer Grant had not moved far. He stood near the rear of the police cruiser, arms at his sides, watching the scene he had created, or rather, the scene he had escalated, unfold in the blue-white glare of the ambulance's medical lights. His expression was complicated, in the way that the faces of people who are beginning to understand their mistakes are always complicated. His radio crackled. A voice, dispatch, familiar, routine, spoke his identification number and then said something that made him visibly still. He pressed the radio to his ear. Listened. His head bowed slightly. 3 neighbors were filming from the sidewalk. 2 more from doorways. The young man in the running jacket had never stopped recording. 6 separate devices were capturing, in high definition, every second of what was happening on this quiet suburban street. The paramedics working on a teenage girl, her father kneeling in the rain, a police officer standing apart from it all with an expression that was beginning to look, in the unforgiving clarity of smartphone footage, like something very different from authority. Then a second police cruiser arrived, and with it, something that changed the entire geometry of the scene. The officer who climbed out of the second vehicle was a sergeant, older, silver-haired, moving with the weight of rank and experience. He spoke briefly with Grant. Grant said something. The sergeant's expression shifted. He reached out and took Grant's body cam in one swift motion, reviewed something on the screen, and looked up. He walked toward Marcus. Mr. Hill, he said. Agent Hill. He paused. The words carried something in them that the previous 14 minutes had been entirely missing. Something that sounded, against all expectation, like recognition, like apology. Because while Amara was fighting to breathe, while Marcus was pressed against the hood of his own car with his wrists restrained, while the woman on the sidewalk was screaming and the rain was coming down and the body cams were rolling, a license plate check had come through. And the license plate check had returned information that no one on this street, in this situation at this moment, had expected. Marcus Darnell Hill. Age 38. Fairfax County, Virginia. Clean driving record. Security clearance level. Top secret / sensitive compartmented information. Current employment, United States Secret Service, Presidential Protection Division. The man Officer Grant had pressed against the hood of a car, while his daughter, asphyxiated in the passenger seat, was one of the people responsible for keeping the President of the United States alive. Grant had heard it through his radio. He had heard it and stood very still in the rain, and now he was standing very still near his cruiser, and whatever was on his face in that moment, caught on 4 separate cameras from 4 separate angles, was something that would be analyzed, captioned, amplified, and transmitted around the world within 48 hours. She's responding, the female paramedic said. She was looking at the pulse ox. 86. Coming up. Marcus pressed his forehead against Amara's. She had her eyes open. She was looking at him. The nebulizer mask was over her nose and mouth, the medicated mist curling upward around her face like fog, and she was breathing. Slowly. Shallowly. But breathing. Hey, he said softly. Hey, she whispered behind the mask. Her voice was barely sound, but it was hers. He closed his eyes. For 3 seconds, just 3, he allowed himself the luxury of feeling the full weight of the last 14 minutes. It moved through him like a wave, through a structure that has been built to withstand waves. It bent him, slightly. It did not break him. When he opened his eyes, he was looking at Sergeant Rains, who was standing at a respectful distance, waiting. My daughter needs to go to the hospital, Marcus said. His voice was not angry. It was not shaking. It was simply, absolutely, irrevocably clear. Yes, sir, the sergeant said. The unit is ready. We'll follow. Grant, who had been standing near his cruiser this entire time, opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, and said nothing. Because there was nothing, not one single sentence in any language available to him, that was adequate to what he had done. Amara Hill was admitted to the Pediatric Emergency Department at Innova Fairfax Hospital at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in October. Her blood oxygen had recovered to 93% in the ambulance, and by the time the attending physician completed her initial assessment, the acute crisis had passed. She was kept overnight for observation. She slept, finally, curled on her side in a hospital bed that was too wide for her, breathing steadily through the night, while her father sat in a chair beside her and did not sleep at all. The footage went live before midnight. Not one clip, 6. From 6 different angles. Uploaded by 6 different people. Neighbors, a jogger, someone who had pulled over when they saw the lights, all within the same 2-hour window. The clips were cross-referenced, synchronized, layered. By morning, they had been viewed 11 million times. By the following evening, 26 million. The images were stark. A black father in a dress shirt, clearly not armed, clearly speaking words that any viewer could lip read or hear. She cannot breathe. An officer, unmoved. A teenage girl in the passenger window, her face partially visible, her condition deteriorating in real time on camera. A father pressed against his own car, his daughter unattended. And then, captured on the clearest of the phone videos, the moment the sergeant reviewed the body cam. The moment he said those 2 words. Agent Hill. The visible change in the geometry of the scene that followed. The internet named it before the press did. The hashtags moved at speeds that no communications office, no department spokesperson, no carefully worded statement could outrun. By the time the Fairfax County Police Department released an official response, acknowledging the incident, citing an ongoing review, emphasizing commitment to professional and equitable policing, the story had already moved past the stage where statements controlled narratives. Officer Grant was placed on administrative leave pending investigation within 24 hours. The investigation was not quiet. A civil rights organization filed a formal complaint with the department's Internal Affairs Division and simultaneously announced a federal civil rights review inquiry. 3 city council members called press conferences within 48 hours. A prominent senator, appearing on a Sunday morning program, said the phrase institutional pattern of racially discriminatory enforcement and looked directly into the camera when she said it. The Fairfax County Police Chief, a 23-year veteran of the department, held a press conference on the 3rd day. She was visibly shaken in a way that press conference training doesn't fully eliminate from the face of someone who is genuinely struggling. She said the words accountability and systemic and failed and I am sorry. Whether those words were enough, Whether they could ever be enough was a question that 3 million people debated in comment sections in the days that followed. Marcus Hill did not speak publicly for 5 days. When he did, he chose a simple medium. He sat at his kitchen table, no flag, no backdrop, no prepared remarks, and he recorded a 9-minute video on his phone. Amara sat beside him. She was wearing a sweatshirt from her school, her inhaler on the table in front of her, fully stocked, its presence almost aggressive in its ordinariness. He looked at the camera and said, "I want you to understand something. I did everything right. I pulled over safely. I kept my hands visible. I spoke clearly and calmly. I identified the emergency immediately. I cooperated. I did everything that every manual, every safety tip, every well-meaning conversation about how to survive a traffic stop told me to do." He paused, and my daughter almost died. The 9-minute video was viewed 41 million times. The comment sections were vast and fractured and human, full of grief and rage and recognition and defensiveness, and the particular raw texture of a public that is simultaneously capable of great empathy and great resistance. Some people wept. Some people argued. Some people shared the video with a single sentence and no commentary because there was nothing left to add. Amara watched the reactions from her bedroom, her laptop open on her desk, her inhaler within reach. She did not find it overwhelming. She found it clarifying. She was 14 years old and she had spent a night in a pediatric ward because of a traffic stop that should have lasted 6 minutes, and something in that experience had crystallized inside her into something that felt less like fear and more like purpose. She told her father, one evening shortly after, that she wanted to be a civil rights attorney. He had looked at her for a long moment, and then, for the first time in a week, Marcus Hill had smiled. If Marcus Hill's story moved you, if Amara's story moved you, please share this video right now. Not just to raise awareness, but because stories like this need to be heard by the people who most need to hear them. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that matter. The truth is worth watching. There are questions in this story that have clean answers, and questions that do not. The clean answers: Amara recovered fully. She returned to school 10 days after the incident, her inhaler in her jacket pocket, and 2 spares at home. Marcus returned to work, to his post, his clearance, his quiet and extraordinary responsibility, after taking a week of personal leave. Officer Grant, following an internal affairs investigation that took 37 days, was suspended without pay for 60 days and required to complete implicit bias and de-escalation training as a condition of reinstatement. A formal civil rights complaint remained pending. These are the facts. They are real and they matter. But facts and justice are not always the same shape. The questions without clean answers are older. They exist in the space between what happened and why it happened, between the individual and the institution, between the incident and the pattern. They exist in the testimony of the woman on the sidewalk, who told a reporter that she knew, the moment she saw the lights in her window, that something was going to go wrong. Not because of anything logical, because of something learned, something accumulated. They exist in the statistics that nobody disputes, the data on traffic stop rates, on use of force incidents, on the demographic patterns that emerge when you overlay zip codes and police activity and outcomes. Data that has been collected, analyzed, published, and largely not acted upon for decades. They exist in the gap between what Officer Grant thought he was doing and what he was actually doing. Because Grant, and this is the most uncomfortable part of this story, the part that is easiest to skip over, was probably not operating from conscious malice. He was operating from something older and quieter, and more pervasive than malice. He was operating from a framework of assumptions, of priors, of patterns built by a system older than him, that told him what a black man in an expensive car in a quiet neighborhood at night looked like. What it probably was, what risk it probably represented. He was wrong. He had the opportunity to find out he was wrong before anyone got hurt. He did not take that opportunity. That is the reckoning. Marcus Hill drives that street every day. He has driven it every day since the night his daughter stopped being able to breathe on the side of the road while a police officer waited for compliance. He has not changed his route. He will not change his route. Because Marcus Hill understands something, professionally and personally, and in every fiber of the training that has defined his adult life. You do not cede territory to fear. You do not reorganize your life around an injustice. You stand in the space that is yours, because the moment you stop standing in it, the space belongs to someone else. But he did do one thing differently. Starting the week, Amara came home from the hospital. He bought her 3 inhalers, one for her bag, one for her jacket, one on the kitchen counter, bright blue, impossible to miss. He told her, quietly, not as a lecture, but as a truth, that the world is not yet safe enough for them to rely on the systems that are supposed to keep them safe, that they have to keep each other safe, that this is not fair, that it is also real. She had listened. She had nodded. She had picked up the inhaler from the counter and turned it over in her hands, This small plastic object that was, in some ways, the most honest thing in their kitchen. "I know, Daddy," she said. She already knew. She was 14 years old, and she already knew. Stories like this one live in two registers simultaneously. The first register is the specific. One man, one girl, one night, one street, one officer. One decision that compounded into a catastrophe that almost could not be undone. This is the register of the individual, of Marcus and Amara Hill, of their particular faces and voices and the precise quality of fear in a father's eyes when he presses his forehead against his daughter's and she breathes. Finally breathes, in a hospital room in the middle of the night. The second register is the structural. It is the register in which this specific story is not an anomaly, but a data point. In which Marcus Hill is not the only person. In which Amara is not the only child. In which there are 10,000 variations of this night, this stop, this escalation. Some of which do not end with a recovered daughter and a suspended officer, and a viral video and a civil rights inquiry. Some of which end differently. Some of which end in a way that we do not have language for. That is not the word tragedy, though that word has been used so many times for these endings that it has begun to lose its weight. Marcus Hill knows both registers. He has lived in both of them his entire life. He is by profession a protector. He moves through the world with his body between other bodies and danger. He absorbs risk on behalf of people who will never know his name. He does this because he believes in something, in duty, in service, in the idea that the structures of this country, however flawed, are worth defending and improving from the inside. He believes that. And he also knows, in the most personal way possible, what it costs. Amara Hill, 14 years old, future civil rights attorney, girl who survived an asthma attack on a wet suburban road while her father was held at bay by a man who did not see her, went back to school and kept her inhaler in her pocket and continued to be exactly who she was. That is the quiet heroism of this story. Not the viral video. Not the hashtags. Not the investigation or the suspension or the press conference. The quiet heroism is a 14-year-old girl who woke up the morning after all of it and went on. Who carried what happened with her, not as a weight, but as information, as something she already knew, confirmed. As a reason. The wet street is dry now. The police lights are gone. The cameras have moved on to the next story, the next incident, the next moment, in the long, unfinished, urgent American reckoning with what it means to be safe. Marcus Hill sits in his car in the driveway of his house. Amara is inside, doing homework, her inhaler on the desk beside her textbooks. He can see the light from her window. It is an ordinary yellow light. It is the most beautiful thing he has ever seen. He sits in the car for a little while. Not because he is afraid to go in, not because anything is wrong, but because sometimes the ordinary moment, the moment that almost wasn't, deserves to be held for a second. To be witnessed. The engine ticks as it cools. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a dog barks once and stops. The streetlights come on, one by one, as the evening gathers. Marcus Hill gets out of his car, walks to his front door, and goes inside. And in the house, a girl is breathing. If this story stayed with you, like this video, subscribe for more stories that matter, and share it with one person who needs to see it. Tap the bell so you never miss a story. Real stories, real stakes, real people. We'll see you in the next one.